Blue and red lights slashed across the stained glass windows of St. Augustine Church, spilling color onto the rain-slicked steps where Father Emanuel knelt, gathering a box of canned food that had fallen from his hands. The cruiser's tires hissed to a stop inches from him. "Hands where I can see them," the voice cut through the drizzle, harsh, commanding. Officer Carter, broad-shouldered and pale-eyed, stepped out, his hand already hovering over his gun. The street was empty but for the hum of wet asphalt and the faint toll of the evening bell. Emanuel stood slowly, palms open, collar gleaming white against the black of his coat. "Officer, please, I said down," Carter barked. "You think a uniform like that means you get to lurk around private property?" "This is my church." Carter laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Yeah? And I'm the Pope." He shoved Emanuel against the cruiser, face pressed to cold metal. The rain quickened. From across the street, a curtain moved. Someone watching, no one helping. "Sir, you're making a mistake," Emanuel whispered. Carter's voice dropped to a hiss. "The only mistake is you people thinking you belong here." A camera phone's faint chime pierced the air, recording light blinking red. Carter froze. His eyes flicked to the collar again, then to the crowd forming under umbrellas. "Officer," Emanuel said softly, trembling but steady, "I forgive you." And just as the words left his mouth, the distant sound of another siren rose. Louder, closer, heavier. The Archbishop's convoy. Carter's hand loosened. Too late. The cameras kept rolling. Rain had thinned to a mist when Father Emanuel turned his aging sedan onto Maple Street. Boxes of food rattled in the back seat. The clock on the dashboard blinked 9:47 p.m. Late, but he'd promised the shelter they'd eat warm tonight. Then the flash, blue and red. He slowed, pulled over. The cruiser stopped behind him, lights slicing the night. He rolled down the window, hands visible on the steering wheel. "Evening, officer. Is something wrong?" "License and registration." The officer's voice was curt, mechanical. Emanuel handed them over. Carter leaned in, scanning the interior. Saw the boxes. "What's in the back?" "Donations. Food for..." "Step out of the vehicle." Emanuel hesitated. "Is there a problem?" "Step out," he obeyed, coat catching rain. The air smelled of wet asphalt and exhaust. Carter circled him like prey. "You delivering this to someone? Or stealing from someone?" "I'm a priest," Emanuel said quietly. "From St. Augustine's," Carter snorted. "Yeah, got proof?" He pointed to his clerical collar. Carter's lip curled. "Costume store sells those too." Silence. The drizzle intensified. A neighbor's porch light flicked on, a faint, curious glow. Carter opened a box, rummaged through cans. "Food bank labels." "You got a receipt?" "I help run the drive myself." "Sure you do." Another cruiser pulled up. Two more officers stepped out, younger, uncertain. One whispered, "That's the guy from the church." Carter snapped, "You see a church here?" He turned back to Emanuel. "Neil, I beg your pardon?" "You heard me." A camera phone clicked on nearby, someone recording. Emanuel's heart hammered. "Please, officer. This isn't necessary." "You people always say that." He pushed Emanuel to his knees. Mud soaked his trousers. The younger officer shifted uneasily. "Carter," he murmured. "This doesn't look right." Carter glared. "Then look away." The radio crackled, dispatch calling in. Carter ignored it. Emanuel closed his eyes. His breath was steady, but his hands trembled. "Stay calm. You've faced worse storms than this." Then, faintly, a child's voice from a nearby window. "Mom, why are they hurting the priest?" The words struck harder than the rain. Carter froze, realization flickering. Then pride smothered it. "Get him in the car." The cuffs clicked. Emanuel winced. As they drove off, the rain swallowed the scene, but the red light of the recording phone blinked on, unwavering. The door clanged shut behind him, a sound sharp enough to cut through bone. Father Emanuel sat on the metal bench, wrists raw where the cuffs had rubbed. The air in the holding cell smelled of bleach and old fear. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, turning his skin gray. Across the corridor, laughter. Rough, careless. "Can you believe he said he's a priest?" One voice jeered. "Next he'll say he's the Pope." Another chuckled. "Bet he blessed the food before stealing it." Emanuel breathed slowly, steadying the tremor in his chest. He had counseled dying men, buried children, comforted addicts, but this coldness without reason pierced deeper than anything. Boots clicked closer. Carter appeared, arms crossed, a smirk on his face. "Comfortable?" Emanuel met his gaze. "I'm not your enemy, officer," Carter scoffed. "You people always think playing holy makes you better. But under that collar, you're just another suspect. I've done nothing wrong. Maybe. But you fit a description." "What description?" Carter shrugged. "Black man, late 30s near the food bank." "That's enough for tonight." Silence. Only the buzz of the lights, the drip of a leaking pipe. "You humiliated me in front of my parish," Emanuel said quietly. "You humiliated yourself when you didn't obey." For a moment, they stood locked in the same air, two men, one in uniform, one in collar, both heavy with conviction. Then Carter turned and left. From the desk outside, Officer Daniels, the younger one, watched, jaw tight. He waited until Carter vanished down the hall before stepping closer to the bars. "Sir," he whispered, "I'm sorry." Emanuel looked up, surprised by the tremor in the young man's voice. "You saw what happened," he said. Daniels nodded. "I did. But if I speak, I'm finished." "Sometimes silence is worse," Emanuel murmured. "It lets evil breathe." Daniel's face tightened. "You don't understand this place. They protect their own. I understand fear." A pause. The hum of radios filled the distance between them. Daniel swallowed hard. "They're saying you resisted arrest." Emanuel smiled sadly. "Then they arrested their own conscience." The words hung heavy. Daniel shifted, uneasy, then walked away. But slower than before, as though each step cost him something. Hours dragged. Emanuel prayed softly. Half whisper, half exhale. He prayed not for deliverance, but for clarity, for the strength to forgive men who mistook cruelty for duty. Midnight came. Rain drummed against the barred window. A janitor passed, pushing a mop. He paused, looked at Emanuel and muttered, "Saw the video. They're saying it's bad." "The video?" "Kid filmed it. It's online. Whole town's watching." A tremor of relief, not joy but something like vindication, rippled through Emanuel. The truth had found eyes. Moments later, the station's phone began ringing, sharp and endless. Voices outside grew tense. "Who leaked it?" "Chief's gonna lose it." "Press already calling," Carter stormed back, face flushed. "You think this saves you?" "I didn't need saving," Emanuel said softly. "You did." For the first time, Carter's bravado faltered. He turned away, muttering curses. Emanuel leaned back against the cold wall, eyelids heavy. The storm outside roared, but inside, something had shifted. He was no longer invisible, and by morning the city would know his name. By dawn, the world had already seen it. The video, less than 2 minutes long, showed Officer Carter shouting, the priest on his knees, rain hammering down like judgment. It spread before anyone at the precinct could contain it. By the time Emanuel was led from the cell for processing, the phones were ringing nonstop. "Turn off that damn TV," Carter barked. But the dispatcher ignored him. Every screen flickered with the same headline, "Priest detained by officer in racial profiling incident." Carter's captain, a stone-faced man named Hayes, stepped out of his office, voice low and clipped. "What the hell happened last night?" Carter straightened. "Routine stop. Suspicious vehicle." "He got combative." "Combative?" "He's a priest, Carter, and there's 100,000 views saying otherwise." Carter's jaw tightened. "People love to play the race card," Hayes snapped. "This isn't about race anymore. It's about optics, lawsuits, the department's name." Inside the holding cell, Emanuel heard their voices through the thin wall. His palms rested on his knees, body still sore from the cuffs. The small square window above him glowed pale, morning light cutting through the grime. From down the hall came a burst of noise, reporters shouting, camera shutters snapping. "Father Emanuel, is it true you were assaulted by the police? Do you intend to press charges?" The guard slammed the door to muffle them. "They'll tire out," he muttered. But they didn't. Soon his parishioners began arriving, first 2, then 10, then a crowd. Faces pressed against the glass. Some held signs, "Justice for Father Emanuel." Others simply wept. He stood walking to the bars. "Tell them," he said to the guard, "tell them I'm all right." The man looked uneasy. "That's not my job." A female reporter's voice pierced through the noise. Sources confirm the detained priest is Father Emanuel Dyke, local leader of St. Augustine's Church. His parish describes him as a man of peace. Carter's voice rose from the next room. A man of peace who disobeyed a lawful order. Enough! Hayes snapped. You're suspended until further notice. IA will contact you. Silence fell like dust. Carter's face drained of color. You can't go home, Carter. Turn in your badge. The sound of metal hitting the desk echoed through the hall. Emanuel closed his eyes. The satisfaction was fleeting, tempered by exhaustion. A few minutes later, Officer Daniels appeared again, slipping into the cell area. They're letting you go, sir, he said quietly. On the Archbishop's orders. Emanuel frowned. The Archbishop knows? Daniels nodded. He's on his way here. Said he's bringing your lawyers and the press. Emanuel exhaled slowly. Then God moves faster than I thought. Daniels hesitated, then added, They're tearing Carter apart online. His old cases, complaints, everything's coming out. Truth finds its way, Emanuel said, picking up his coat. Even through mud. As they walked past the front desk, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted over one another. Father Emanuel, how do you respond to the department's statement? Will you forgive the officer who arrested you? He stopped at the doorway, rain still falling outside. His voice carried calm authority. I will pray for him, he said simply. But prayer does not erase accountability. The crowd went silent. He stepped into the rain, free but not untouched. The cameras followed as he walked to the waiting car. Inside the cruiser, Daniel stole one last glance at the priest, then at Carter standing by the window, staring out like a man watching his own life dissolve. The screen in the station replayed the video again and again. Carter's voice echoed through tinny speakers. You think you belong here? Outside, the church bells began to ring, to be continued. The convoy reached the precinct at noon. 3 black sedans and a silver SUV gliding to a halt beneath the fluttering rain. Reporters surged forward as the rear door opened. Archbishop Lawrence stepped out first. Tall, calm, his presence was quiet thunder, a stillness that commanded attention. His robes, trimmed in deep violet, seemed almost defiant against the gray sky. Behind him walked 2 aides and a lawyer in a navy suit. Briefcase clutched like a weapon. Move, an officer muttered, trying to block the crowd, but the Archbishop only raised a hand. His voice was low but carried. No one is above the truth. Inside the station, Hayes stood at the entrance, sweat beading at his temple. Your Excellency, this is a secure facility. Lawrence cut him off gently. And I am here to see my priest. He turned. Father Emanuel Dyke, where is he? Hayes hesitated. He's in interview too. They moved down the hall, camera flashes popping through the glass. The building, usually immune to scrutiny, now felt like a stage. Every uniform stiffened under the Archbishop's gaze. Carter was there too, standing rigid near the end of the corridor, face pale, uniform disheveled. When the Archbishop passed, Carter's throat tightened. Lawrence stopped. You're the arresting officer. Yes, sir, Carter muttered. Do you know whom you arrested? A priest. No, Lawrence's eyes held him. You arrested the man appointed to succeed me, the future Archbishop of this state. The hallway fell silent. Even the hum of the light seemed to dim. Carter blinked. That's not possible. It is, Lawrence said evenly. And you did it on camera. He moved on. Hayes exhaled, muttering under his breath, God help us. When the Archbishop entered the small interview room, Emanuel rose from the chair. His collar was askew, his hands still trembling faintly from the night before. My son, Lawrence said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. I came as soon as I saw the footage. I am well, Emanuel replied, though his voice wavered. But this house, he gestured around, gray walls, metal table, is colder than I imagined. Lawrence nodded slowly. You handled yourself with grace. The world is watching now, not because of the cruelty you endured, but because of how you endured it. Emanuel looked away. Grace feels hollow when it must prove its own humanity. Outside the door, officers lingered, listening. The Archbishop's next words cut through the thin wall. Grace is not weakness. It is defiance without violence, and it is what terrifies men like him. Carter turned and left, jaw clenched. Minutes later, the press conference began in the lobby. Cameras crowded every inch of space. Archbishop Lawrence stepped to the podium. Emanuel beside him. Last night, Lawrence began, a servant of the church was detained, humiliated, and accused without cause. This is not merely an error of judgment. It is a symptom of a deeper disease, one that corrodes institutions from within. A reporter called out, "Will you press charges?" Lawrence looked at Emanuel, giving him the choice. Emanuel shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "Justice is not vengeance, but it must be seen." The words struck like bells through the crowd. At the back of the room, Daniel stood in uniform, eyes fixed on the floor. Carter, off duty now, stood beside him, face hidden beneath a cap. As the press shouted more questions, Carter slipped out the side door. The rain greeted him again, relentless, cold. He leaned against his car, shaking, not from guilt yet, but disbelief. He had thought it would blow over, that the world would move on, that power would protect him, but power had turned its gaze elsewhere. Back inside, Emanuel stepped away from the podium, exhaustion etched into his features. Lawrence leaned close and said quietly, "They will try to smear you next." "Be ready," Emanuel nodded. "I was born ready for disbelief." As the Archbishop's convoy pulled away, cameras followed until they disappeared into the storm. The town was no longer quiet. It buzzed with conversation, outrage, and a single question echoing everywhere. How could this happen here? Back at the station, Hayes gathered his men. "Until further notice, Officer Carter is under review. IA begins tomorrow." Carter didn't look up when they said his name. He only stared at his badge, a small tarnished symbol that suddenly weighed like sin. The living room smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. Carter sat hunched over the television, volume low, eyes locked on the screen. Every channel played the same clip, his clip, looping endlessly. The officer, identified as Sergeant Daniel Carter, has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The anchor's voice was calm, surgical. Each word cut. His wife, Mara, stood in the doorway, arms folded. "You said it was nothing," she said quietly. Carter didn't look at her. "It was nothing." He resisted. "I followed procedure." "Procedure?" she repeated, voice rising. "You shoved a priest to the ground on camera." He wasn't wearing his robes. He was wearing a collar, Dan. He turned then, anger flashing. "You don't know what it's like out there. Everyone's a threat. Every stop could be the one that kills you." Mara shook her head. That man didn't look like a threat. He looked terrified. Silence. The rain outside drummed against the windows, the same sound as that night. Carter rubbed his temples. "They're making it about race." "It wasn't about race." Mara stared at him, the pause stretching too long. "Then what was it about?" He had no answer. Only the echo of his own voice in the video. "You people think you belong here." The doorbell rang. Carter opened it to find Captain Hayes standing under an umbrella, flanked by internal affairs officers. "Dan," Hayes said quietly, "we need to talk." Inside, they sat at the table. Carter defensive, the IA agent impassive, recorder blinking red. "Officer Carter," the agent began, "we've reviewed the footage and the reports. There are discrepancies. Body cam audio was missing for the first 3 minutes. "Why?" Carter stiffened. "It malfunctioned." "Malfunctioned," the agent repeated flatly. "Same as the complaint from last spring? And the one in June?" "That's coincidence," the agent leaned forward. "Do you often find coincidences when detaining black men?" Hayes shot the agent a warning look, but the question hung heavy. Carter's jaw tightened. "I don't see color," he said finally. "Then why?" the agent replied. "Do all your discretionary stops involve it?" Carter's hands curled into fists. "You're twisting this." "No," the agent said. "You did." When they left, the house felt emptier. Carter stared at the table, at his untouched coffee, at the quiet shadow of his wife watching from the hallway. "Dan," she said softly, "you need to face what you did." He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "They're destroying me." "No," she said. "You did that yourself." He slammed his fist into the table, the sound cracking through the air. "I gave this city 20 years. And one mistake, one truth," she interrupted. "You can't call it a mistake if you've done it before." Her tone was steady, not cruel. But it hit harder than any reprimand. Carter turned toward the window. Outside, a van from Channel 7 idled on the street, reporters waiting like vultures. He closed the blinds. Down the block, neighbors whispered. Kids pointed. The uniform that once commanded respect now carried the stench of disgrace. That night, Mara slept in the guest room. Carter sat alone in the dark, replaying the video again and again. Each time, his own voice sounded less like authority and more like something feral. He poured another drink, muttering to himself. He set me up. He wanted this. But even he didn't believe it. On the screen, Emanuel's face appeared, calm, bruised, resolute, giving a brief statement outside the church. I forgive him, Emanuel said. But forgiveness doesn't mean silence. Carter froze. His reflection in the glass looked hollow. The words hit harder than condemnation ever could. Forgiveness, clean, merciless forgiveness, why, was something he couldn't fight. And for the first time, Daniel Carter felt afraid. Not of losing his job, but of facing himself. The church was overflowing. Reporters lined the back walls, cameras humming, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Outside, the street was blocked by vans, microphones, umbrellas, the entire city waiting to see if the man they had watched kneel in the rain would stand before them with vengeance or grace. Father Emanuel adjusted the mic. The faint echo from the sound system filled the nave. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, parishioners, journalists, strangers. The marble beneath his shoes was cool. The carved Christ above the altar loomed like witness and judge. Archbishop Lawrence sat nearby, silent, observing. Emanuel began, voice low but steady. I am not here today to speak of anger, he said. I am here to speak of truth. He paused. Cameras clicked. What happened to me should never happen to anyone, and not because I am a priest, but because I am a person, a citizen, a man. He looked toward the front pew, where a small child, the same one who had shouted from the window that night, sat beside her mother, eyes wide. We teach our children that justice is blind, but too often, he continued, it sees color first. Gasps rippled through the audience. Outside, Carter sat in his parked truck across the street, window half open, radio tuned to the live broadcast. Every word hit him like glass, Emanuel went on. I do not hate the man who arrested me. I pray for him. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetfulness. Forgiveness is a door. Accountability is the threshold we must cross to mean it. The room was silent. Only the faint hum of air vents filled the space. Lawrence leaned forward, murmuring, beautifully said. Emanuel nodded slightly, then looked straight into the nearest camera. To those who wear the badge, I honor your service. But power without humility becomes tyranny, and fear disguised as duty is still fear. A murmur spread among the journalists. He continued, quieter now. Last night, as I sat in a cell, I prayed not for freedom but for vision, that our city might finally see itself. What we do next will define who we truly are. Applause began, hesitant, then growing until it filled the church. Reporters shouted questions, flashes erupted, microphones thrust forward. Father Emanuel, do you plan to sue the department? Do you accept the department's apology? Have you spoken with the officer since your release? He raised a hand for silence. I do not seek to destroy a man, he said. I seek to heal a system. The crowd fell still again. Outside, rain began to fall. Carter leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel. On the radio, Emanuel's words carried through static. We can no longer call it a few bad apples when the orchard itself needs tending. Carter switched the radio off. His pulse thudded in his throat. Through the windshield, he could see the church doors open as Emanuel stepped out, surrounded by people. Reporters swarmed, flashing bulbs in his face. For a moment, Carter considered starting the engine and driving away. But something pinned him there, the image of Emanuel standing calm beneath the same rain that had humiliated him. He remembered the trembling voice that had said, I forgive you, while he still had his hand on the man's neck. Mara's words came back to him. 2. You can't call it a mistake if you've done it before. The guilt was no longer deniable. It crawled through his veins like fire. Inside the church, Lawrence approached Emanuel as the crowd dispersed. You've changed the narrative, the Archbishop said quietly. The city can't pretend anymore. Emanuel's gaze lingered on the doorway, where a figure stood half hidden in the rain. Carter. For a fleeting second, their eyes met across the chaos, priest and officer. Both exposed, both marked. Carter lowered his gaze first. Then he turned and walked away. Emanuel exhaled, hands trembling. Forgiveness, he murmured, is heavier than anger. Lawrence placed a hand on his shoulder. And yet it is the only weight that lifts. That night, the press replayed the conference on every major network. Hashtags trended. Debates erupted. Some praised Emanuel's composure. Others accused him of being too gentle. But when the clip ended, one line lingered everywhere, printed, replayed, quoted, "Forgiveness is not forgetfulness." And somewhere, alone in the dark, Officer Carter whispered it back to himself, like a prayer he didn't yet know how to mean. The Internal Affairs office was windowless, painted in the color of paperwork. Off-white walls, dim lights, air that smelled faintly of dust and tension. Carter sat at the table, suit wrinkled, tie loosened. Across from him, 2 IA investigators laid out files like evidence at a wake. "Sergeant Carter," the senior investigator began, tone clinical. "You are aware this interview is being recorded?" "Yes," Carter muttered. "Good. Let's start with your body cam footage. There's a gap, 3 minutes and 14 seconds missing. Explain." "It malfunctioned." Again, the investigator slid another file forward. "Records show 6 prior malfunctions in your patrol history, all during encounters involving Black or Latino men." Carter's throat tightened. "Coincidence?" The younger investigator leaned back. "You've used that word before." Carter's jaw clenched. "You think I'm some kind of racist?" The senior officer didn't flinch. "We think you're a man who's never had to ask himself that question honestly." Silence. The hum of fluorescent bulbs filled it. From the corner, Daniels sat stiff, summoned as a witness. He looked uneasy, hands clasped tight. The senior investigator turned to him. "Officer Daniels, you were on scene the night of the arrest?" "Yes, sir." "You witnessed the exchange?" Daniels hesitated. "I did." "Did you see Father Emanuel resist arrest?" A long pause. Carter's eyes burned into him. Daniels swallowed. "No, sir. He didn't resist." Carter's chair scraped loudly. "What the hell are you doing, Daniels?" The senior investigator raised a hand. "Sergeant Carter, you'll remain silent unless addressed," Daniels went on, voice trembling but gaining strength. He was calm. "He showed his ID, told us he was a priest." Carter kept pushing. "Said the collar was fake, told him to kneel." Carter slammed his fist against the table. "You think you're saving yourself by lying?" "I'm saving the truth," Daniels shot back. The room froze. The younger investigator hit the pause button on the recorder. The senior leaned forward. "Officer Daniels, you understand this will go on record?" "Yes," Daniels said. "I should have spoken sooner." The older man nodded once, pressed record again. "Let it be noted that Officer Daniels has confirmed excessive conduct and abuse of authority during the arrest of Father Emanuel Dyke." Carter slumped back, face pale, breathing uneven. "You're throwing me under the bus for PR. You know how this works. They need a scapegoat." The senior investigator's voice was steady. "Scapegoats are innocent. You're not." When the session ended, Carter was escorted out. The hallway felt longer than he remembered. Every uniform he passed turned away. Outside, reporters waited. He covered his face, pushing through flashes, and shouted questions. "Sergeant Carter, is it true IA recommended termination? Do you regret your actions?" He didn't answer. Across town, in his office at St. Augustine, Emanuel watched the evening news. Daniels was giving a brief statement. No press, no glory, just truth. "I didn't do it for the cameras," Daniels told the reporter. "I did it because silence makes you part of the harm." Emanuel switched off the TV. For the first time since that night, he smiled, not in triumph but in relief. The next morning, the official report leaked. IA recommends termination and criminal review for Sergeant Carter. The department released a statement promising reform and renewed commitment to community trust. Carter sat in his kitchen, letter in hand, the words swimming before him. Suspended without pay pending legal review, Mara stood behind him, quiet. "They're finished with me," he said hollowly. "They're finally starting," she replied. He looked up, eyes red. "What's left for me?" She didn't answer. She just set his badge on the table and walked away. The medal caught the morning light, once a symbol of order, now a mirror reflecting only the man he'd become. The city woke to headlines that rippled across every screen, radio, and corner diner conversation. Police sergeant dismissed following racist assault on local priest. Investigation expands to department culture. Carter's face, once proud and sharp in uniform, was blurred behind a red banner of shame. News anchors dissected his past conduct. Community activists called for systemic reform. And the mayor promised accountability without delay. At St. Augustine Cathedral, the morning light streamed through stained glass, painting the pews in hues of crimson and gold. Emanuel stood before his congregation, robe pressed, voice calm yet edged with exhaustion. "My brothers and sisters," he began, "forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. Justice without truth is a hollow peace." He paused, gaze sweeping across the room, a sea of faces, some tearful, some defiant. "We must not return hate for hate nor silence for comfort. Let this wound speak, until the world listens." Applause broke, quiet at first, then rising, but not for vengeance, but for courage. Outside, reporters waited again. Emanuel stopped briefly, addressing the microphones. "I forgive him, but forgiveness is not escape. It is the beginning of reckoning." Across town, Carter sat in his truck, engine off, listening to the same broadcast. The sound of Emanuel's voice cut through him like glass. He turned it off, but the silence afterward was worse. His lawyer's words echoed in his head. "They'll pursue civil action. You might face charges." He had always believed he was the law's guardian. Now he was its warning. Later that afternoon, Daniels visited the church. He lingered at the door until Emanuel noticed him. "Officer Daniels," Emanuel greeted softly. "Or should I say, Michael." Daniels looked down. "I came to apologize. I should have spoken up that night. I froze." "You spoke when it mattered most," Emanuel replied. "That's what history remembers." Daniels nodded, eyes wet. "They're turning the whole precinct upside down now. Training, oversight, things we should have had years ago." "Change is slow," Emanuel said. "But the river cuts stone not by power, by persistence." That evening, Carter received a letter, not from the department but from Emanuel. He hesitated before opening it. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No sermon, no condemnation, only a line written in careful, deliberate hand. "Accountability is not your punishment. It is your chance to begin again if you have the courage." Carter read it twice. Then he folded it neatly and set it beside the badge he no longer wore. Days passed. The department released new body cam protocols, bias training initiatives, and public listening sessions. Cynics called it optics. But to the families who had waited too long for justice, it was a beginning. At one such session, Emanuel was invited to speak before a mixed crowd. Officers, citizens, journalists, skeptics. He stood at the podium not as a victim, but as witness. "I'm not here to destroy anyone's career," he said. "I am here to ask, what kind of community do we want to build? One ruled by fear or one governed by conscience?" A silence followed, not empty but attentive. From the back, a woman raised her hand. "Do you really believe they'll change?" Emanuel met her gaze. "I believe we must act as if they can. Otherwise, we've already lost." After the forum ended, Daniels approached him again. "He didn't show," he said quietly. "Carter?" Emanuel asked. Daniels nodded. "Couldn't face it." Emanuel looked toward the door. "He will someday." Weeks later, Carter did return. Not in uniform, but in plain clothes, standing in the back of the cathedral. He didn't move, didn't speak. Emanuel saw him but said nothing. He simply continued his sermon on humility. When it ended, the congregation filed out slowly. Carter remained. Finally, he stepped forward. "Father," he began, voice hoarse. "I came to listen." Emanuel studied him. "Then listen with your life, not your ears." Carter nodded once, eyes lowered. He left quietly, the echo of his footsteps fading into the high arches above. Outside, the sun was setting, streaks of gold breaking through gray. In that fractured light, the city looked both guilty and forgiven. For the first time, Carter didn't reach for his badge. He didn't need it to feel the weight of accountability pressing against his chest. Emanuel watched from the doorway as the man disappeared down the steps. A choir began to sing behind him, low, mournful, resolute. The story wouldn't end with applause or absolution. It would end with work, the kind that begins when the cameras turn away. And as the final note of the hymn rose, the Archbishop whispered, not for the crowd, not even for Carter, but for the soul of a city trying to wake up, Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an unending stream.